se o pai dele aparecer aqui?
Ah, e daí? Você acha que eu tenho medo do Sr. Barriga?
Claro que não, porque o Sr. Barriga é muito boa gente. Mas eu fico com pena porque ele tem tanto azar que sempre ele chega e na mesma hora que ele chega eu acerto ele.
Mas hoje não, Chaves. Hoje quebrou-se o sortilégio.
Quem quebrou o sacrilégio?
Quebrou-se o sortilégio. Eu quero dizer que hoje não me recebeu com uma pancada.
Ah, não recebemos ele com uma...
Seu Barriga, é bom que o senhor tenha vindo. Veio cobrar o aluguel, não é?
Não me diga que o senhor tem dinheiro.
Tinha. Só que tive que gastar para comprar todos os vidros que uma certa pessoa me quebrou. Que eu não quero dizer quem é, mas que tem as bochechas de mamão macho.
Seu Barriga, não deixa de xingar o senhor desse jeito.
Não, Kiko. Ele xingou você. O seu Barriga não tem bochechas de mamão macho.
Obrigado, Chaves.
Sim, de mamão gordo.
Obrigado.
Agora, o que ele tem de gordo, ele tem de bom, né?
Ora, deixa disso, Chaves.
Ou seja, ele é bonzíssimo. E além disso...
E agora
ele...
basta!
Mas é que...
Tá. Você não sabe o que quer dizer basta?
A esposa do Basto.
Não. Basta quer dizer chega!
Depende. Quando se diz que uma coisa é basta, se fala de uma coisa que é abundante, que é muito, mais ou menos assim como...
Basta! Será que não podem ficar 2 minutos sem ferver a barriga do Sr. Sangue?
O que foi que o senhor disse? Calma. Quer dizer então que foi você que quebrou os vidros do Sr. Madruga?
Sim, mas é que foi um só.
Pra mim não importa a quantidade. O que importa é o fato, não importa a quantidade.
A gente nota.
Agora preste atenção. Agora mesmo você vai dizer à sua mamãezinha que ela vai responder pelos vidros quebrados.
Sim, senhor.
Mas a minha mãe não está.
Eu a espero voltar.
Sim, senhor.
Enquanto isso, eu vou tratar de outros assuntos.
Sim, senhor.
Como cobrar o aluguel.
Não, senhor.
Das outras casas.
Sim, senhor.
Daqui a pouco eu volto.
Sim, senhor. Sou uma besta.
Sim, senhor. Não, senhor.
Só não te dou uma por...
There's a moment in a 2011 wildlife documentary where a honey badger gets bitten directly in the face by a puff adder, one of Africa's most venomous snakes. It convulses, collapses, and appears to die on camera. And then, about 2 hours later, it wakes up, shakes it off, and goes right back to finishing its meal. That's not a movie scene. That actually happened. And if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about honey badgers, then buckle up. Because this animal doesn't just break the rules of biology, it straight up ignores them entirely. Now you might think, okay, it's a badger. It's probably just a chunky, grumpy little digger, right? Like a raccoon with attitude problems? Wrong. The honey badger, or Mellivora capensis, is currently listed in the Guinness World Records as the world's most fearless animal. And before you dismiss that as a fun little title, let's talk about what that actually means in practice. These animals have been documented chasing lions off their kills. They've been recorded getting stung by entire swarms of bees and just eating the bees. They've been known to fight off animals 10 times their size, take a venom hit that would kill most creatures, and then nap it off. And they do all of this at a maximum weight of about 16 kilograms, roughly 35 pounds. For reference, that's smaller than most golden retrievers. So how exactly does a dog-sized animal get away with terrorizing an entire continent? Well, it starts with the body. Honey badgers belong to the family Mustelidae, the same family as otters, wolverines, and weasels, but don't let that fool you into thinking they're cute. Underneath that fluffy black and white exterior is basically a biological tank. First, the skin. Honey badger skin is about 6 millimeters thick, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that's thick enough to resist most arrows, machetes, and even some spear thrusts. But more importantly, it's also incredibly loose. This means that if a predator grabs a honey badger by the scruff of the neck, which is usually the move that ends the fight for most animals, the honey badger can literally turn around inside its own skin and bite back. That's not normal. That's horrifying. Second, the claws. Honey badgers have long, powerful front claws designed for digging. And when I say designed for digging, I mean they can dig through solid asphalt. They've broken into reinforced enclosures at zoos. One famous honey badger named Stoffel, we'll come back to him, repeatedly escaped from a sanctuary using tools he fashioned himself. We are not making this up. Third, that snake venom situation. Honey badgers have evolved a partial resistance to venom through a mutation in their nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, the same kind of mutation seen in some snakes themselves. Basically, their body has learned to shrug off what would be a death sentence for other animals. They're not completely immune, but they can survive bites that would kill a horse, take a nap, and wake up ready to go again. Now here's where things get genuinely unsettling, because honey badgers aren't just tough, they're smart. And the story of Stoffel is probably the best example of this. Stoffel was a honey badger kept at a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa, and over the course of several years, he managed to escape from his enclosure, repeatedly, using a series of increasingly creative methods. He rolled rocks to use as steps. He used sticks as ladders. He raked dirt into corners to build himself a ramp. When keepers put a stick in the enclosure just to test him, he immediately used it to try to escape. The researchers watching him described his problem-solving as unprecedented for a non-primate species. He wasn't just reacting, he was planning. And this intelligence extends into the wild, too. Honey badgers are known to remember the locations of beehives and return to them strategically. They've been observed working with other species, most famously the honeyguide bird, in what some researchers describe as one of the most remarkable examples of interspecies cooperation in the animal kingdom. The bird finds the hive, leads the honey badger to it, and then gets to eat the scraps left behind. Both species benefit. Both species appear to understand the arrangement. That's not instinct, that's negotiation. So now let's talk about why the Guinness title actually makes sense. Most prey animals have what biologists call a flight response, a threat threshold at which they decide the situation is too dangerous and run. Honey badgers appear to have this threshold set at approximately never. They've been filmed confronting leopards, lions, and Cape buffaloes. They have been documented actively charging at humans. There is footage of a honey badger being thrown by a lion, getting up, and immediately going back toward the lion. The prevailing theory among researchers is that honey badger fearlessness is an evolved strategy. Because when you have skin that thick, claws that strong, a bite force of 370 newtons, and venom resistance, running away is often more dangerous than just fighting. So over generations, honey badgers that fought back survived more often than those that fled, and now we have an animal that seems to be running on a factory setting of pure, weaponized confidence. The ecosystem itself seems to have picked up on this. Even large predators, after a certain amount of experience with honey badgers, tend to just leave them alone. Lions have been documented walking away from a honey badger after a brief confrontation, not because the lion lost, but because the juice simply wasn't worth the squeeze. Now, as you might expect, an animal this stubborn has had a complicated relationship with humans. On one hand, honey badgers are genuinely useful. They control rodent, snake, and insect populations across a massive range spanning Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. They're ecosystem engineers. Their constant digging aerates soil and creates burrows that dozens of other species rely on. On the other hand, they raid beehives, destroy crops, break into chicken coops, and have been known to terrorize entire villages with what can only be described as pure personal vendetta energy. There are accounts in South Africa of the same honey badger breaking into the same farm repeatedly. After being relocated 20 kilometers away, they came back. They always come back. And yet, despite all of this, or maybe because of it, honey badgers have become a kind of cultural icon. That 2011 viral video, the memes, the merch. The internet decided, collectively, that the honey badger represented something. A refusal to back down, a commitment to doing exactly what you want, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. And honestly, fair enough. Because at the end of the day, the honey badger is a 16-kilogram animal that convinced an entire ecosystem to get out of its way. And it did it not with size, not with speed, not with numbers, but with an almost philosophical commitment to simply not caring. Which, when you think about it, might be the most powerful survival strategy of all. Thanks for watching, and until next time.